Hello MGTOW, hello men, this is Howard Dare. Thanks for stopping by. So, I was wandering around the internet and I came across an article on Nietzsche's Thus Spoke Zarathustra. And I found it very interesting, and I thought you guys would find it interesting as well, because it offers just a brief introduction and summary to the work, and it kind of gives an overview of what Nietzsche is talking about. So when you guys hear about it, and you encounter it, you'll have some basic idea as to what's going on. So I just want to read the article from the website, and I'll point to the article in the description below. So here it is. Thus Spoke Zarathustra, summary and analysis of the prologue. Nietzsche's Thus Spoke Zarathustra begins with the line, "When Zarathustra was 30 years old, he left his home and the lake of his home and went into the mountains." Zarathustra is a kind of modern-day prophet. He leaves the world to live as a hermit in the mountains, but one day his heart is transformed, and he feels the need to go back into the world of humanity. He first has a conversation with the sun, and tells the sun that he has tired of all the wisdom he has accumulated during his time alone. He tells the sun that the reason he wants to return to humanity is so that he can spread the wisdom he has attained to all people. As Zarathustra is coming down the mountain, he encounters an old man. The old man tells Zarathustra that he saw him pass 10 years ago. The old man can tell that Zarathustra has been transformed. He warns Zarathustra not to return to civilization with the fire of his knowledge, for anyone who starts a fire will be punished as an arsonist. Zarathustra replies that he loves mankind. The old man asks him why he doesn't want to stay in the woods with the birds and the bears. The old man himself lives in the woods to get away from human beings, saying that they are too imperfect for him. He prefers to commune with God in the wilderness, away from humanity, and they part. Zarathustra is surprised that the old man, as wise as he is, has not heard the news that Zarathustra has come to bring. God is dead. Zarathustra enters a town, and he begins speaking to a crowd of people waiting to watch a tightrope walker. He begins to tell them about the overman, a state of being that they are capable of entering. He says that as they laugh at the apes, so the overman will laugh at regular human beings. The people should no longer listen to anyone who tells them that their soul must escape their body to go to heaven, because God has died. The overman's greatest hour is when he overcomes feelings and states such as happiness, reason, virtue, and justice. When Zarathustra finishes, the crowd thinks he has been talking about the tightrope walker, and they laugh at him. Zarathustra is shocked at the response he gets, and he continues to preach to the people. He tells them that as human beings they can cross over and go under. This, he says, is the true way to sacrifice oneself to the earth and become an overman. The overman is a person who lives in order to know, who lives to create virtue, and who seeks no thanks for his virtue. The people still laugh at him. So Zarathustra decides to tell them of the last human being. The last human being upon the earth will realize that human beings invented happiness. He will realize that love was simply an evolutionary reaction to the body's need for warmth. The last human being will not want wealth or poverty, nor will he desire poverty, because both will be too burdensome. As Zarathustra finishes his first speech, the crowd laughs and mocks him. Zarathustra realizes his words are not having an effect. While the crowd is laughing, the tightrope walker begins his routine. As the performer gets halfway across the span of his rope, he hears a voice coming from behind. The voice is telling the tightrope walker to move out of the way, to go back to his tower. And suddenly, the being behind him jumps over the tightrope walker. The walker, so surprised by this, falls from his tightrope and lands next to Zarathustra, slowly dying from the fall. The tightrope walker asks Zarathustra if he thinks he can stop the devil from dragging him to hell as he dies. Zarathustra only comforts him and tells him that hell no longer exists, and that to die through the dangers of one's work is a great honor. Zarathustra sits next to the corpse until nightfall, and then buries it. Zarathustra brings the corpse to a graveyard, where the gravediggers laugh at him for trying to steal a soul from the devil. On the way there, the jester, who jumped over the tightrope walker, causing his fall, sneaks up on Zarathustra and whispers in his ear to leave the town. He tells him that the pious hate him, as do the good and just, and that if he stays another day, they will all kill him. As Zarathustra walks on with the corpse, he becomes hungry and stops at a hut in the woods where an old man offers him bread and wine. After eating, he continues wandering for 2 more hours, finally stopping to sleep after he buries the corpse in the hollow of a tree. He wakens in the late morning and realizes that talking to the masses of the people is like carrying around a dead corpse. He needs to find companions who will follow him around and learn from his teachings. As Zarathustra thinks these thoughts, he looks up to see an eagle with a snake around its neck. The snake is not the bird's prey, however. They are friends, and to Zarathustra, their friendship represents his need to couple his wisdom and his pride. If his wisdom were to leave, Zarathustra thinks his pride must leave as well. The prologue ends with these words: "Thus began Zarathustra's going under." Analysis. In the prologue, the reader is first introduced to Zarathustra, a man who ventured into the wilderness 10 years ago and has found contentment and enlightenment during his time alone. Zarathustra is given the idea that because of his love for mankind, he will venture down his mountain to proclaim to civilization that there is a better way to live. Zarathustra speaks to the sun, and seeing how the sun ascends and descends every day, decides he will do the same. Thus Spoke Zarathustra is filled with allusions to classical philosophy and literature. Zarathustra's conversation with the sun and his descent back into civilization is an allusion to Plato's myth of the cave, in which a philosopher descends into a cave to share his insights. Descending and ascending are important concepts in Thus Spoke Zarathustra. In each case, Nietzsche describes a kind of transformation that happens to the individual. Zarathustra ascends to the mountain wilderness and becomes a different kind of being, an enlightened individual. He descends to become a different being again, a kind of prophet and philosopher. Throughout the work, Zarathustra talks of men's need to descend in order to ascend again and become something else. One of the most important distinctions in Nietzsche's work is the contrast between Apollonian and Dionysian elements of the world. The Dionysian represents the chaotic and dark parts of humanity. Zarathustra has experienced these elements on the mountain, and they have led him to realize that God is dead. The Apollonian elements of the world represent order, reason, and culture. By being on top of the mountain, Zarathustra is surrounded by the Dionysian, yet his physical proximity to the sun represents his ability to talk with and understand the Apollonian. Both elements are important to understanding Nietzsche's philosophy in Thus Spoke Zarathustra. Zarathustra's mission is to balance these opposing views and to help others balance them as well. As Zarathustra descends from his mountain, he begins to encounter different kinds of people. He meets a hermit who lives in the wilderness so that he can praise God more fully. However, as Zarathustra says, the hermit doesn't realize that God is dead. It should be noted that the death of God is not the culmination of Zarathustra's philosophy, but its starting point. For Zarathustra, the saint's communion with God is meaningless and an impediment to finding a true way to communicate with the world. Zarathustra's first attempt to communicate his message to the masses are met with trouble. He immediately begins to preach to them of the overman, yet the crowd thinks Zarathustra is talking about the tightrope walker that they have come to see. Even he thought the speech was a failure. It gives the reader a sense of Zarathustra's message nonetheless. According to him, the overman is the meaning of the earth. Because God has died, there is no use in praying to him or worrying about sin. Instead, the overman should only remain faithful to the earth. For Zarathustra, the tragedy is not that God has died, but that people still seek to find meaning in their lives from a dead God. If a person seeks a God who is dead, that person risks being confronted with nihilism, the conviction that there is no meaning in life. Nihilism is a state intolerable to human beings, but a belief in God, Zarathustra says, only numbs the soul. This is the lesson he means to teach with his parable of the last human being. Zarathustra does not want people to be faced with nihilism, so he offers an alternative. His alternative is the Overman. In German, the original word is Übermensch, which can also be translated as superhuman. The Overman is a being that has a new relationship to the earth and to nature. It is the highest form of being that a human can attain. Much as the ape evolved into the human being, according to Zarathustra, the goal of humans should be to then evolve into the Overman. For Zarathustra, this promise of something better is what can take the place of the belief in God. The image of the tightrope is thus an appropriate one for this first speech. For Zarathustra, human beings are torn between the beasts from which they have evolved and the Overman they can become. The tightrope walker, as he is walking across the rope, is teased by the voice of the jester behind him. The jester represents the voice of tradition. Nietzsche is telling the reader that attempting a feat such as trying to become an Overman is a dangerous task, one that the voice of tradition will attempt to thwart. The jester eventually disrupts the tightrope walker's trek, causing him to fall to his death. As Zarathustra talks to the dying performer, the reader can see how foreign Zarathustra's message is to the society he has encountered. While the tightrope walker attempts to talk of his eternal destiny, albeit a destiny in hell, Zarathustra simply tells the man that there is no hell, rendering the question of his eternal destiny moot. Zarathustra's conversion of the man to atheism secures a peaceful death for him. For Zarathustra, the man's life is meaningful because he dies in the face of the danger he lived in. Zarathustra wanders through the forest, finds some food from another old hermit, and realizes that his attempts to convey truth to the people have been for naught. Everyone he meets heckles him, and the jester who killed the tightrope walker tells him that he needs to leave the town or he will be killed. After sleep, Zarathustra realizes that he must try a new strategy. Instead of speaking directly to the crowds, he needs to speak to a group of disciples. Okay, so that's just this little introduction and analysis that I came across while browsing, and I just wanted to share it with you guys. Now, the part that really struck me on this was the image of the tightrope walker and this idea of him trying to walk away from tradition and walking towards, the possibility of becoming the Overman, and how the voice of tradition will thwart him, will attack him. And I liken this to going MGTOW, where the man trying to find his own way. And I compare this to the idea of the Overman. Right? Now, this isn't a complete break with tradition. This isn't a complete turning your back on the social conventions with, which you live, or the laws, because that would get you destroyed. But it is this recognizing that many of the ideas, the expectations that have been put upon the man are there to enslave him, and that he needs to go his own way, and that he is going to be attacked and mocked. And that the people who are doing this, they haven't even considered the possibility, that there might be something else, that they might be wrong. So in going your own way, it's not your job to convince others that they were wrong. That's a fool's errand. It really is. Just try to stay focused and find your own way. And you don't need to fight with others to convince them, that comes much later. Anyway, this analysis goes on, and it's really interesting, and it talks about, some of the speeches and what they mean, and it gives this really nice overview and summary. So I think you guys would enjoy it. So check it out in the description below. And let me know what you think about this in the comments section below. And please like, share, comment, subscribe, donate, and join me again, Howard Dare, as I plan to have more content for you. Thank you, MGTOW.